Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Viper versus Mista. This is day number 2 of the $100,000 N4C. Both of these players sitting in the Gamer Legion headquarters, the venue for this $100,000 tournament in Berlin. I'm providing an offside commentary, which means that I'm receiving the same image that you see on the screen. I'm not the one controlling the camera or anything in the game. And I'm going to be adding my voiceover to this one. Spawning in on the left side of the map is going to be, in red colors, the Mista playing as the English, and to the north it is going to be Viper playing in the Mongols with the color blue. Having the Ovu placed to the north of his town center, the town center a little mispositioned compared to that gold mine. If it was a couple of tiles closer, it would be a great town center, because if you have your town center close to your wood line and your gold mine at the same time, you don't have to make a Gur in Dark Age, which saves up a bunch of wood that you can utilize. Now, both of these players are great innovators, which means that both of these players can come up with some crazy, never-before-seen strategies that could be interesting to look at as we go deeper into this set. Now, both of these players are also coming out of a defeat yesterday, Viper falling to the Muslim 3-1, and also Mista lost his game against the Lidakor also in a 3-1 fashion. This is the Swiss stage of the tournament, which means that whoever loses here is not eliminated, but given the fact that both of these players lost their first day sets, if they lose today, they will fall down 0-2. You have 5 rounds in the Swiss bracket, and the lowest 2 performance out of the 8 players will be eliminated. This means that one of these players will fall down, at least temporarily, for an elimination position, and that is definitely something that you want to avoid if you're either Mista or the Viper. Right now we're seeing Mista's POV over here. He has a very, very good scouting already, as you can see on the minimap. You can also, for a brief moment, see his hand moving on the keyboard as we are now switching back to the spectator POV. On the left side, you can see Viper's resources being banked up very consistently. He's going to just play fast feudal here, no Dark Age aggression shenanigans. Whereas for Mista, he's probably on the way to feudal age already because his resources are looking quite low. So we'll have to see if he's on the way indeed or he's doing something cheesy. I don't see a landmark icon inside his base, so I'm curious to see if Mista is actually going up or not. Yep, here comes the council hall. He's building that right now with the 3 villagers. Up north, Viper is likely going up with the deer stones. That's the usual way of playing the Mongols over here. Now, the Mongols is a civilization that has a great matchup against the English, because the English want to play with that spearman archer unit composition, and that's something that the Mongols can counter quite effectively with just mass archers over here. So that's probably the direction that Viper has to head towards. Go for the mass archers, and force the English player to play with horsemen. Now, if there is a player that doesn't shy away from playing with horsemen using the English, that's going to be Mista. In fact, in the qualifiers of N4C, we have seen Mista utilizing horsemen multiple times. Despite the fact that he's playing with the horsemen, he's still using the council hall to age up, so no Abbey of the Kings for him either. Because just the sheer possibility of being able to add the archers whenever needed is something that justifies the council hall more than the Abbey of the Kings. If you're playing horsemen with the English, which is something that Mista did in the qualifiers, as I said before, you can technically justify the Abbey of the Kings, but still, the possibility to add longbowmen with the council hall makes it a more valuable landmark. Viper is going to send in his Khan to harass the gold miners for a brief moment, but looks like Mista doesn't really care about this one, so Viper will probably just leave and leave his scouting falcon behind. Viper is aging up to feudal age with the deer stones as we speak. It looks like he had to add a Gur over here, so that's definitely not the most ideal situation. If you can find a good town center spot for yourself, where the town center is adjacent to both the forest and a gold mine, then you can save up on that Gur. But of course, the longer time you take to find yourself a town center spot, the more villagers you sacrifice. So that's a consideration that Viper has to make. Now, looking at the base of Mista, he's starting to add farms over here, and this is a dangerous build. We have seen this from Mista multiple times in the qualifiers. The idea for Mista is that he's making as little army as humanly possible, and just playing a very defensive feudal age, booming up with a farming eco. One thing that this gives him is a super safe economy, very difficult to raid because it's very compact, supported by the network of castles bonus provided by the town center. And the other thing that this gives him is the ability to have an absolute juggernaut food eco, which propels him to a very nice castle age timing. So for Mista, this is all about very defensive gameplay. You see, he's very heavy on the lumberjacking department right now. He's making a couple of longbows, but he's not going to spam a ton of those out. You're not going to see him going for like 50, 60 longbowmen in feudal age, supported by spearmen. Some players do that with the English. Mista won't do that at all. Viper dropping a defensive tower on his gold mine. He knows exactly that aggression could come any moment from the English player. It's a possibility. Viper does have a con in the scout as well, so he's gonna be able to spot the incoming longbows over here in the middle, as you see. And he has dropped the stable, so he's gonna have horsemen out. Now, if you look at that tiny red dot at the top of the screen, this over here, that's a scout from Mista, and that is a scout that has vision on this Ovu out there from Viper. And adjacent to that Ovu, you have a stable. So Mista is fully aware of the fact that Viper has a stable, and I would be very surprised not to see a barracks from him. Indeed, there is the barracks already dropped by Mista. As you see, he dropped only 2 farms, he sees the stable, he will react with the barracks and delay the addition of the farms. But overall, Mista is going to play very defensive. If you look at his army count, it is just 2. And this is a very Mista-esque playstyle. This is something that we haven't really seen in the qualifiers. In the qualifiers, he was a lot more focused on aggression with the English, just using a slightly more unconventional way of doing that by using horsemen. But this is something that is rather new from Mista. I think we have seen this yesterday against Lidakor, and this is a very powerful build because it's difficult to break. The opponents will have to mass a large army to break into your base, and the English have the ability to mass a lot of longbows for defense quite easily. So that's the power here. The moment you see your enemy committing a lot of free resources into an army, Mista will be able to get some longbows out himself from that council hall quite fast to react to that. So it's all about a reactionary game here for Mista. He is responding to whatever Viper is doing, and this time around, since Viper isn't putting a lot of pressure on him, he's just going to start booming with the farms. He's placing the 4-2-4 placement of the farms, which is the most effective farm placement if you want to maximize the efficiency of your mill with the English. It is way better than the 3-2-3, that is the easiest to build. Takes a little more attention, as we do have one longbow being picked off by the tower over here. The second volley comes out from the tower, also damages an archer, and now you see, Mista's gonna do some pressure over here on Viper's base. Viper will respond by dropping a defensive tower on his hunt. He's going to have to secure that source of food for himself. Viper spots the army over here, will get some shots out with that con for the time being, but minimal damage is inflicted on those spears and archers, so not something that Mista has to worry about. Now, Viper has gotten wheelbarrow for himself, so his economy is quite powerful. Mista has done the same thing, and now you're seeing the double stable play. Mista is a cheeky player. He isn't shying away from doing unconventional things. In fact, he's one of the greatest innovators in Age of Empires 4 history. He's the first player to work out the French professional scouts build, which dominated the Age of Empires 4 scene for like a month after release. And he is the author of many sort of new line strategies. And that is something that helped a lot in his tournament performances, because oftentimes he's the guy that's coming up with the brand new things that others will just end up copying in the future. Here comes the horseman play, and given the fact that Viper has the con harassing that army, Viper doesn't have vision on these horsemen, and this could come as a nasty surprise. I think Viper isn't really expecting this push. Viper probably has watched the previous games of Mista. He probably has seen that Mista often just goes for this low army boom composition, but he's probably not expecting Mista to go for double stable horsemen at this point. You see, there is some archers over here for Viper, but I would be very surprised to see him having any spearmen on the battlefield. And if Mista is playing this one patiently, grabbing the blacksmith defense upgrade potentially for his units, the range defense upgrade, and masses like 6-7 horsemen, this could be a devastating force. Looks like he's going to send in the horsemen right now. Viper does have that scout hidden over there, so the moment the horsemen move out of the base of Mista, Viper was able to spot those, and he's going to utilize this information. Viper's gonna have to scramble for defense here, however, because he doesn't have an answer right now to those horsemen, and longbows, they can use their extra range to try and pick off gold miners. That's exactly what Mista is attempting to do. Meanwhile, horsemen will try to poke around over here. Viper is using line formation on his archers, which is going to maximize their damage output in this archer versus archer wars. And for now, Mista is just sort of amping up the pressure on Viper's base while also building up a strong farming eco. Now, one thing that Mista has to be careful about is that Viper is getting closer and closer to Castle Age, and that's going to change the tide of the battle, or turn the tide of the battle. Because once Viper gets to Castle, we could see men-at-arms, we could see lancers. Mista is not far away from Castle Age either, but Viper will probably beat him to Castle, and that could be overly concerning for Mista. Now, with the horsemen coming out and no response from Viper to those just yet, he could potentially lose his Ovu over here, and that's exactly what Mista is planning to do. There was a second stable being placed by Viper, or was there a barracks? Yeah, that's a barracks that he's building, and he moved the stable. This is something that Mista could actually set on fire. Viper is now deploying the stable. Villagers are being pulled to repair that Ovu, and Mista will disengage for time being. He will try to pick off that villager sent to repair the Ovu, and now seeing the archer numbers shift to the north, Mista is going to call off his forces. But Mista is known for these two-pronged attacks. He knows very well that the archers are on the north, so he's going to try and leverage this, send the archers in from the right side. Viper's got towers over there, so that shouldn't be a concern for him right now. Mista banking up the resources. It looks like he's gonna be able to drop his Castle Age landmark at approximately the same time as Viper. Viper was a little low on gold, which delayed his Castle Age, and now you could see those hunters exposed to the horseman, although with two defensive towers, one of them having arrow slits as well. This is going to be a tough fight for Mista, but it looks like he's motivated to take this one. He wants to take that tower down, and this could be a disaster for Viper. Losing 3 villagers over there would definitely be painful, and the tower is about to get burnt down over here. Mista is committing against this one. The archers are shifting sides, but those archers are wide open to be killed from the horsemen, and that's exactly what Mista is thinking about. Mista is just going to use the horsemen to kill all the archers. The villagers do get away thanks to the Yam network over here. One villager gets picked off by the longbows, but Viper has to sacrifice his whole group of archers here. Viper shouldn't be worried about losing those archers because he probably wants to go men-at-arms or lancers in Castle Age, so those units become to a certain extent obsolete. But Viper is now cut off from reliable food income. If you look at his food income per minute, that's dropping quite dramatically. He's down to 175, and now it's 55 per minute. That was Viper's only source of food. And right now, Viper isn't really going to be able to pump out a massive amount of lancers and men-at-arms if he has no food to work with. Meanwhile, Mista himself is on the way to Castle Age, and Mista's eco has been untouched. In fact, he has a very well-established English farming eco. He aged up with the King's Palace, if I could see it correctly, which means that now he has a second town center as well. Viper is losing his Ovu as well, which means that no double training anymore. And at this position, Mista is now adding his own lancers. Viper has double barracks, so he's going to probably start popping out some spearmen to respond to those horsemen, although it looks like it's actually men-at-arms if you look at the top side of the screen on, like, just below Viper's webcam. So it is men-at-arms play from him, but the men-at-arms won't perform that well against the forces of Mista once Mista mixes in the lancers. Viper does have the step readout working for him, which of course helps a lot with the economy. He's down by 8 villagers, but of course every villager working close to that step readout is worth 1.5 villagers. So right now the economies are rather even, although Mista also has his own English farming eco, so you gotta wonder if Viper is actually behind an eco here, actually, and it seems like it's the case, especially the food eco is a little concerning for Viper. The other thing that Mista has going for him right now in this game is sustainability. His food eco is set up long-term, Viper is not. Viper is just now adding pastures, he still was relying heavily on those huntables, and he's yet to add a substantial amount of pastures to maintain a good food economy. So you see, Viper's food income per minute is now climbing, it's 420 per minute once again. But Mista behind this one is building up an even greater eco with the second town center, and now he's shifting focus. He's realizing that, okay, Viper is a little bit on the back foot, and I can leverage this, I can use this window to build up my own economy and just utilize that against Viper. Now, Viper is adding some mangonels, which could be concerning for the English, but I'm not sure how much Viper has seen from the lancers of his opponent. Maybe he's expecting crossbows against the men-at-arms, but the lancers will work out quite nicely over here for Mista, and one thing that he's going to have over Viper is going to be mobility. Currently, Viper's forces are exclusively made out of infantry, which makes them very slow-moving, and the map is wide open. Villagers like these on the hunt, for example, could be exposed to knights raids, and if you look at the minimap for a brief moment, there is a group of knights that's heading towards that location from the south, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Mista trying to probe an attack in the middle, and by probing an attack, he pulls away Viper's forces to this side, allowing the knights to rampage that food economy on the right side. That's probably the game plan here for Mista, and you see the horsemen are being sent forward in the middle, knights approaching the base of Viper from the right side, and then again, here it goes. 2 knights on the berries, but the main group is heading towards the hunt over here. Viper is gonna have to scramble for defense once again. Yam Network saving a ton of those villagers, but knights won't shy away from burning down those towers. And the moment they start burning down the towers, Viper will have to react. It looks like they will just run past the tower, actually, trying to jump on the lumberjacks. Viper scrambling for defense with the spearman, and it looks like Mista is tempted to commit against this one. The horsemen are getting taken down by the arrow fire. But in the middle, you do have the villagers potentially exposed to the knights over here. Longbows are also joining the party, and the longbows can take down the spearman, allowing the knights to finish off the men-at-arms. The tower gets finished by Viper, but he loses the villager in the process. And as you see, those knights will just come back every once in a while to try and pick off Viper's food eco. This is the problem that Viper is facing right now. It's called lack of mobility. Now, one thing that Mr. desperately needs is 1 or 2 Springolds. He needs something against those Mangonels because currently a lot of his military is in the form of longbows, and those longbows could be taken down quite easily by the Mangonels. For now, Mista, however, is leading by 17 villagers. As we said before, there is of course the step red out for Viper, but the most important thing that's going in the favor of Mista right now is mobility. He's gonna have a window to strike at those villagers on the right side once again, and look at that. It's the 2-pronged attack once again by Mista. 2 knights from the left, 4 knights from the right. You're almost guaranteed to find something. Here come the knights over here, as Mista sent them towards the berries. You're always probing those resources. Gold mines, hunts, berries, because you are expecting your opponent to move out towards those resources every once in a while, and now you see the knights coming in from the right side as well. Looks like the lumberjacks will be sandwiched from 2 directions. Spearmen reacting quite rapidly thanks to the M network, so they will catch up with this one. Mista isn't able to get any villager kills, but Viper was also suffering from a lot of idle time on his eco. In the middle, the tower of Mista is getting taken down, however, as Viper's infantry is tempted to jump on this one. The cavalry from Mista flanking around, trying to jump on the siege weapons. Spearmen will adjust, and this way, Mista is gonna have to call off his cavalry for the time being. Some spearmen were picked off by the longbows. You can see the dead bodies all across the screen, but the mangonels are standing strong, and now Mista needs to find an answer to those, because spearman mangonels is something that he could have serious trouble dealing with. Viper was using that con to great efficiency, killing some gold miners, but we have a big battle unfolding in the middle. Knights flanking around once again. Mangonels opening up against those longbows. Nice jukes over there by Mista. He's using the knights now to try and take down the Mangonels. The first Mangonel is gonna get taken down. Mangonels inflicting minimal damage on those longbows that are spread out, and Mista is taking a decisive win over here. He's wiping out the entire force of Viper. Just getting rid of all of the spearmen using the longbows, and the staggered formation and the longbows being split was the key factor here for Mista. He was able to minimize the damage output of those Mangonels, and as you see, right now we're switching into the POV of the Viper. He's calling off his forces. This is what he can see. He sees his con, he's been harassing the opponent, but aside from that, he's pinned inside his base with no siege available. If you look at Mista's perspective, he knows that there is blood in the water. He knows very well that he just destroyed 3 very important siege weapons. He's adding some more stables. He's up to 4 now, and we are going back to the caster POV. Another Mangonel is being added by Viper right now, but Mista is slowly gaining ground over here. 68 villagers over 49 now. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that Viper is using Mongols, a very important high win rate civilization. So losing this game would be painful quite a bit for Viper, because Mongols, in theory, should be the superior civilization compared to English. Once again, Mista is going to send his forces to the north. Viper will adjust, but this will leave a window in the middle, I believe. Viper will send all his spearmen to try and deal with the cavalry, and Mista is going to utilize that window to try and push the gold mine, and he could find a lot of villagers. Viper's reaction is swift. He jumps into the tower, and thanks to the M network once again, the Mongols are able to react to this one and just adjust their army. But Mista is slowly suffocating Viper at this point, because every direction, Viper is facing raids after raids. 33 army versus 49. Mista has the lead in that department, but he's bumping into so many spearmen, and he so far wasn't really able to crack the defense of Viper. Viper with the spearmen and Mangonels still standing strong at holding his position. Keep being placed in the middle as the Mangonel opens fire on those longbowmen. A couple of longbowmen got damaged over here. You got a tower coming up in that stealth forest as well. That would be a crucial tower for Mista, because that would expand his network of castles bonus. Of course, he also wants to finish that keep in the middle area. Looks like he might have actually cancelled it upon seeing Viper's forces arrive. Mista is regrouping over here. He's got a lot of damaged longbows, but he's trying to pick off as many spears as possible before taking this engagement. He needs to snipe the Mangonels with the cavalry once again, since he has no Springolds to work with. Castle almost finished over here. Key defensive position now established for Mista. He's gonna have firepower to control this central area. He's gonna have the network of castles bonus over here, boosting his units. Viper is actually trying to prevent towers from being built close to the sacred sites. I do believe that Mista is trying to get those sacred sites under his control. Relics weren't really picked up by either of these players, but if Mista wants to force Viper out of his base, one way to do that would be to start capping the sacred sites. Mista has an absolutely stellar food economy. You can see that it's 1500 food per minute. And now we're seeing a Traction Trebuchet being dropped by our Mongol player. Up north, Knights will get rid of that one man at arms that denied the tower. And this would be the time for Mista to send in the raids into Viper's base. He's got the critical mass of Knights. It's such a large number that you can commit against the town center, against the tower fire. And with the cast in the middle, you can hold off the opponent. And that is the exact same thing that Mista is thinking about. He's got the castle to act as a buffer. He can slow down the opponent's push. And he can send in Knights into Viper's base. And he could do a ton of damage with those, potentially kill 15-20 villagers. Longbows tried to probe the gold mine, but the big push is coming in through the north. The Ovu is going to get ignored, and that's the right move from Mista. Ignore the Ovu because it's not really doing much right now for Viper. If you can kill 15-20 villagers, that's going to justify completely ignoring that Ovu, and that's exactly what's happening. Here comes the Night Raid, and only a few spearmen stand to stop these. Spearmen continuously being popped out, so it's going to be difficult for Mista to maintain this fight. He just needs to dive in and kill as many villagers as he can, and that's exactly what he's doing. Viper is scrambling to run into the towers. The town center is full. The towers are full. You just gotta commit those knights. You will probably lose them, but you're probably going to take 15-20 villagers with yourself. And given the fact that Mista already has the villager lead, this could be lethal to Viper. Viper is trying to make a run for it with those villagers affected by the Yam network, but Mista is doing the right thing over here. He's cleaning up as many villagers as he can, and Viper is dropping dramatically in villager count. Now, of course, Mista still has to weather the storm because Viper's got 47 army ready to push him. There is going to be a Springald emplacement being placed on that tower. You can see that for a brief moment. Traction Trebuchet shelling that one castle over there, but Mista should have no trouble repairing this one for the time being. Mista is going to lose most of his knights over here, but the ability and just the fact that he's got 89 villagers over 52 is giving him the ability to replenish those knights much easier. And that's the entire point of this one. Mista sending out the Springald, trying to deal with the siege weapons of Viper. Viper getting 2 shots out of his own Springald, gets rid of Mista's one. Mista's gonna have a tough time getting Springalds going, although we do have to note that English can make Springalds on that castle, which means that this is something that Mista can continuously replenish using that one keep over there in the middle. Viper dropping some more towers. Those will be good as weapon emplacements with Springald emplacements on them, or they will be good as well to sort of boost your DM network. The question is, when is Mista going into Imperial? Because that is one of the factors to consider. Now that he's got 1100, 1200 food per minute, quite a decent gold income as well, he has to consider Imperial Age at some point, because that's where the English could really leverage that farming eco. Looks like he's going to try and get some damage done on those trebuchets over here. Free mangonels set up, however, and on the right side, Viper's got some spearmen getting close to those villagers as well. Lancers now jumping in on the forces of Viper from multiple directions. The Springalds are taken down at the front, but the most important thing, the mangonels getting slain by all of those knights at the back. One mangonel went down, a second mangonel is going down, and the third one is also taken down. All the forces of Viper are just vanishing from the battlefield because the spearmen are on the right side. All the spearmen of Viper went on to raid, and they are not here to reinforce this army. The Khan gets taken down, the Trebuchet gets taken down, so will the towers. And honestly, that force at the bottom isn't really doing much. These spearmen were much needed for the fight in the middle because they were the units responsible for keeping those mangonels alive. Viper is down to 26 army. Most of that are stranded spearmen close to the base of the opponent. Something that Mista can clean up using 10-15 longbows without any major problems. And Mista now has a window to push Viper's base. We are talking about 62 army over 26. And with the longbows facing no siege weapons, they can finally dive in underneath the town center, start picking off the spearmen, and you can start working your way through those villagers underneath the town center. Villagers will make a run for a tower, but as you see, not every villager can fit in, and Viper once again will start losing economy. And based on that movement of the hand from Viper, that is a GG being typed. And Viper taps out of game number 1. Huge win for Mista, and you can see it on his face. He is extremely happy. He himself thinks that this is a gigantic win, and I have to agree with him. Because at this point, this might have been one of the most important wins in this entire set. First of all, it pushes him to a 1-0 lead. Second, he's using an English civilization, which, as we discussed, should be slightly weaker in this matchup than the Mongols. And the most important thing is that he's winning a neutral map. So from this point on, all he needs to do to win this set is win his own home maps. We're going to play Viper's home map now, which is going to be either King of the Hill or Mongolian Heights, but this is a gigantic win here for Mista. an extremely important win. As I said, probably the most important one in this set. Viper is going to lose access to his Mongols, Mista is going to lose access to his English, and Mista is going to have the first game in his pocket. Looking at the civilization draft real quickly, it's a double Delhi ban, which means that all other civilizations are accessible for the players. Mista will still have his Mongols, and if you would ask me who is the best Mongol player in the world, I would probably say Mista. Viper's one of home map is King of the Hill, and Mista has an exceptionally good performance with Mongols on that map, so I wouldn't sleep on that either. This is gonna be a rough rodeo for Viper because he's down one game, and I feel like the worst part is yet to begin. Welcome back to Viper versus Mista. We are going for Viper's first home map over here. Viper down one game versus Mista, and do we have a bit of an overlay bug over here? I do believe we do. This map is King of the Hill. Spawning in on the right side is going to be Viper in blue, and indeed, the overlay has just updated, so Viper is going to be utilizing the French over here in blue on the right side, and the left side is going to be Mista as the Mongols. This is why I said in the lobby that I do believe that Viper is in for a rough ride over here, because Viper, one of the best players in H1 4 history, definitely has a history of coming back from difficult situations, but this is gonna be really tough, because if there is one person that's extremely intimidating with Mongols on King of the Hill, that is Mista. I can tell you, Mista is the Mongol magician. He is the person that probably delivers the most effective builds with the Mongols, and in particular on King of the Hill, he's able to utilize that to great effect. Now, Mongols in many ways is a counterpick to the French civilization, but French definitely have their options over here, so I'm curious to see what Mista has in store for us today. When he played this civilization in the qualifiers, he actually played a defensive, semi-fast castle style play, and once again, that adaptive play style that I mentioned in the previous game came into life in those games as well. So what we could see from Mista was actively scouting his opponent, evaluating how much his opponent is committing to army, and adjusting his unit composition and numbers according to that. If Viper isn't committing much to a push, Mista is going to play a fast castle here with the Mongols. If Viper is committing a lot, Mista is going to commit a lot himself. And that's one of the things that makes Mista dangerous with this one. He's one of the most adaptive players out there. Now, there has to be a reason why this is Viper's home map, and Viper has chosen the meta civilization pick, which is going to be the French over here. French is a super... Oh, Khan? That was a little weird. Khan freaked out for a brief moment, and Mista's gonna have to catch up with the speed arrow. You can see that Mista is doing one of his signature moves, sniping off sheep from the back of the opponent's scout. This is something that he does so often with the Mongols. Viper going up to feudal age with the School of Cavalry over here. So, one of the things that we have to mention is that the French are the meta civilization pick on this map. Brute force civilization with a good economy, good unit composition, and the most important thing, the ability to stretch out the battlefield. The ability to have knights roaming across the map, forcing your opponent to defend in multiple directions, allows you to have a window in the middle in which you can place a castle and from that point on just hold that hill. Because on King of the Hill you only have one sacred site, so whoever controls that will start the sacred site countdown, forcing the opponent to push this one. And one of the reasons why Mongols is an intriguing and somewhat dangerous choice here for Mista is because he doesn't have walls available, so he can't wall his base. He doesn't have keeps available, so he can't even drop a keep in the middle. So we'll have to see how Mista plays this one, but for the Mongols in this matchup, it's all about the unit numbers, and it's going for a defeat of Viper rather than controlling the sacred site in the middle. For Viper, if he can't take down Mista here, he's going to try and control the sacred sites. That's the thing that you usually do with the French. But with the Mongols, you can't really play for that. You're likely going to play for full annihilation of the opponent. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight is the resource locations for the players, as we do have both players aging up to feudal age. If you look at Mista's gold mine in particular, that's very far away from his town center. So both the berries and the gold mines are very far from the TC. There's a backup wood line that he could utilize over here in the corner, and there is actually a gold mine close to it, so that would be a great spot. But his starting spot is not really spectacular. Meanwhile, for Viper, if you look at his base, his gold mine is also quite far away from the town center, so that's not ideal either. And you know, now seeing pastures being dropped by Mista. This is something that he loves to do because the pastures are very effective, and given the fact that the Ovu is right next to the town center, he can drop the pastures close to the TC and in the influence radius of the Ovu. And because the sheep are trained faster on the pastures when it's in the influence radius of the Ovu, this is going to get a great food eco going for Mista. Now, this is what I was afraid of for him. This gold mine is dangerously exposed, and Viper is using that fact so well over here. He's already sending his knights over, and it looks like Mista could even lose his Khan. That's a disaster. Losing the Khan over here in this situation will mean that you are completely blind. You have no idea where Viper is coming from. Viper even yoinks a villager with those scouts. Disaster for Mista on all directions. He lost his Khan. This way, he also donates 4 sheep to Viper, which Viper will just be very happy about, of course. He lost access to his gold mine, which means that a fast castle is no longer an option. And he lost a villager as well. Disaster strikes Mista after disaster. He's just now finishing up with the deer stones, while Viper is dropping a mill, which could be a sign for professional scouts. He does have some extra sheep to work with, so he doesn't necessarily need that upgrade, but it's still something that he could think about. And if he feels like he has the edge over Mista, he could just make 1 or 2 knights, raid back and forth, try to harass Mista, and he himself could be thinking about a fast castle here. Mista's at 420 stone. He hasn't used a single bit of stone just yet, and you can see the hardened spearman upgrade coming in for our Mongol player in here. So he's going to respond to those knights with a couple of spears, and Viper is actually moving out for a hunt on top of the hill. It's a little risky of a choice, but if you know Mista's playstyle, this could work out so well. Because as I said, Mista, especially in this civilization matchup on this map, he's a very responsive player. If he's not seeing a lot of army coming out from Viper, he's not going to commit a lot of army either. Which means that those villagers are not at major risk right now. So it's a gamble for Viper, but it's a wise gamble. And I think it's a smart gamble here for Viper that will probably pay off for him. First knights arriving right now from Viper. Of course, you do have the Yam network for the Mongols here, so that's going to accelerate the movement speed of your spearmen, making it easier to adjust to those knight raids. One knight came in, damaged the villager, but wasn't able to pick it off. Knowing Viper, he's going to try and turn back and kill that one villager that is already damaged. Meanwhile, Mista is adding quite a lot of pastures. His food eco is looking great, but his gold eco is an absolute train wreck right now. And look at that scout spot for Viper. That scout is overlooking the entire valley. That's a very clever scout placement, and this is something that is giving an insane amount of information to Viper, allowing him to diagnose when he can strike at that wood line. He sees if there is spearmen nearby, and he's going to time that strike well. Now the Khan is going to spot that scout over there, so Mista is aware that Viper sees his base, and now we're seeing the French killer unit composition, if I may say so. Horsemen and spearmen, this is a dangerous matchup for the French. We have seen the French getting taken down quite often with this unit composition. And since Mista barely used any stone before, he's gonna be able to pop out quite a lot of those units really fast. And I feel like Mista is realizing that, okay, Viper is not committing a lot of army over here. What if I do start committing to it? And this could be dangerous for Viper, because, for example, that mill in the middle is now a target for a Mongol player to burn down, and that's going to give resources for Mista. Especially if Mista finds that mill, that could be worrisome for Viper, to a point where Viper should consider deleting that if he feels like Mista's going to push out of his base, because you don't want to give free resources to Mista. Horsemen and the Spearmen for now regrouping back at the base of Mista. Viper, however, banking up the resources for Castle Age. Viper has gotten Wheelbarrow, and now he's grabbing the gold mining upgrade as well. So that's going to be a great economy for him to work with. Mista, for the time being, is rallying his forces back at home. The problem for Mista right now is that he invested a lot into his army, yet he hasn't used it. Looks like his scout could also get trapped over here. The knights trying to take down the scout over here. Scout tried to escape, but he was cornered, and the knights will take down the scout. Also nice charge over here from Viper. He's taking this fight before the spearmen can join the party, and now we're talking about this hunt. Viper is dropping a tower, but that's an even riskier call now, because that many spears and horsemen could easily burn down the tower and the mill as well, which means that you give 50 food and 50 gold for the Mongols player now, thanks to the burn bounty. Viper is sending his knight to the south, so one of the ways that you can sort of compensate for the fact that you have low army numbers for Viper is by counterattacking. So you see, he's going to swing in from the south, and this will force Mista to defend. Now, Mista shouldn't be deterred from this one. In fact, he should just go spearman defense himself, and then launch a counterattack with his forces. He's going to spot the knights over here, and he's going to have to cancel that Gur out there, otherwise he's going to lose that Gur very easily. Spearmen now adjusting to the knights. They do brace for the impact. They did not stun the knights, however, so the knights can get away from this engagement. But Mista is pushing up the middle here with those horsemen and the spearmen. And as I said, Viper is going to abandon this position. And with no one garrisoned inside that tower, that's a fiesta for the Mongol player. Love the move from Viper, deleting the mill, but not the tower. By deleting the mill, he's not giving the bounty to the Mongol player, but the moment the building is damaged by the Mongols, it is forever marked for bounty, which means that the Mongol player will get the bounty even if you delete it. So Viper only deleted the building that was not damaged by the Mongols. Part of the reason why with the Mongols you start running around with your Khan early and shooting buildings is so that you sort of mark them for death. Here comes Mista, however, and he's ready to burn down those buildings, and he's not messing around. That's a lot of Spearmen and Horsemen, and Viper has no response to that. Viper is in Feudal Age still, so the best thing he can do is spears, but he's just now scrambling for defense, and all Mista needs to do is just set this building on fire. He doesn't need to destroy it, he just needs to set it on fire, and I wonder if he gets the bounty every time he sets the building on fire, because if he does, then Viper shouldn't repair, because Mista will just let him repair, set it on fire again, and that's going to give a lot of resources to Mista. Mista now has a ton of food to work with, but he had trouble accessing gold. Viper, however, floating a lot of gold, little low on food because he had to abandon that farming or that hunting eco out there. And now with Mista protecting that gold mine, suddenly Viper is in trouble. Because Viper has to start making a lot of army over here to react to this one. Obviously, Mongols will be more than happy to fight Spearman Wars because it's a lot more effective for Mongols. Khan is going to pop the speed arrow, forcing all of the forces back from Mista for retreat. But the key thing here is that Mista was able to compensate for his much lower gold bank, and at this point, Viper forced to make a defense here means that Viper is not going up to Castle Age yet, and look at Mista. He's the first one to drop his landmark. The step redoubt is being constructed at that southern gold mine. Indeed, there it goes. It's being built by 11 villagers as well, so Mista knows very well that he needs to rush this up as fast as possible. He's going to try and poke around, try to see if there's any other building that he can burn down. The jackpot would be to burn down the tower and hit the gold mine, because that would make life very difficult for Viper. Now, what's the plan here for Viper? He's going up with the guild hall. He's got 2 barracks, 1 stable, which is basically the School of Cavalry. Viper could add men-at-arms to deal with the spearmen, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Mista preemptively adding some crossbows himself. Town Center takes down 1 horseman, but now Mista's going to swing around, and there's a lot of targets on this side of the map, especially those houses close to the School of Cavalry, or just lying on the right side of that mill. Houses are very easy to burn down, and they do give the same bounty as other buildings. So for Mongols, targeting houses is always very valuable. Viper will try to launch a counterattack, but there is enough spearmen here for Mista to defend. And right now the problem for Viper is that his unit composition is inferior compared to Mista's one. Here comes the cavalry charge, bit mismicroed by Mista as he's coming in with the spears now. He's trying to take the best possible fight. That's a Castle Age Khan that's going to help immensely against the spears. But he's not really willing to take this fight because there's just so much firepower coming out from that town center. He needs to just keep these spears back at the base of Viper, just so that Viper has to keep his own forces in here. And I would expect Mista to start popping out potentially some men-at-arms over here. But where are the spearmen? Where are the spears here for Mista? Those were mismicroed so badly, and this could be a lifesaver here for Viper because he's starting to slay villagers left and right here. Mista is down to 37. That's an absolute disaster for Mista. That's at least 5 dead bodies on that gold mine, and that's exactly the momentum Viper needed. Of course, the step redoubt is going to compensate to a certain extent for that lower villager count, and some of that villager count discrepancy comes from the French town center working faster. But that is exactly the counterattack Viper needed, and I have no idea how those spearmen ended up walking up hills. Viper probably just outmaneuvered them so heavily, and that is something that was very concerning for Mista. He just lost 5 villagers on that gold mine. Meanwhile, the knights are still rampaging his base. So many spearmen out for Mista. We're talking about 27 army, and I'm fairly certain that like 80% of that is spears. Now, Viper is adding his men-at-arms, and that's going to be a great response to the spears, and I didn't see a response to the men-at-arms yet from Mista. No lancers, no crossbowmen, and that's getting a little concerning for him because I get the feel that now he's a little stuck with this unit composition. He finds a perfect spot for the Khan on top of the hill. That must be so frustrating for Viper. That Khan on the top of the hill, especially a Castle Age Khan with this superior damage output compared to a Feudal Age Khan, can just harass those villagers forever. Veteran Spearman is in for both players. You can see their spears turning into little halberds, so to say. And that's going to be now in for both players. Spearmen brace for impact over there. They will take down 2 stunned knights. That's great value over there for Mista. Or is he going to take them down? Looks like Viper is getting away with those. It's a little lucky for Viper out there. He could have lost both of those knights. Viper with quite a lot of eco upgrades in as well. He's got wheelbarrow, he's got the gold mining upgrade as well. Whereas for Mista, he's lacking eco upgrades. And I get the feel that Mista's push here stalled out a tiny bit. He's got a huge force of spearmen, but that's basically it. Viper was also making a siege workshop back at home, so manganose could soon become a reality. Viper mining stone as well. He's getting ready to drop a keep in the middle. He's still far away from that. It's only 240 stone in the bank, but he's getting ready for that. Here come the Spearman from Mista. He's going to try and take a fight over here, but there's so many men-at-arms over here, and you gotta wonder if this is a fight Mista can ever win. Not a single unit that's capable of dealing with those men-at-arms. There's a couple of Lancers, however, now. Maybe Mista is the mastermind because he's trading off his spears against the opponent's spears, and guess what? Now there is no Spearman left for Viper to fight those Lancers. Men-at-arms also hitting the field over here from Mista, and I may have overestimated the capabilities of those men-at-arms here from Viper. Mista did the right thing, actually. He sacrificed some of his spears to the men-at-arms, but he took down all the Spearmen from Viper, and one thing that this gave him is the ability to charge in with the cavalry and deal with the infantry now. Mista sitting at 26 army, and now he's sending the Lancers to that gold mine. That's the jackpot. Starting to kill villagers over there would be immensely valuable. Viper's counterattack has been nullified by the forces of Mista. Still some defensive spearmen out for Viper, but we're seeing something very reminiscent of game number 1. Mobility advantage heavily on the side of Mista. He's the one using the high mobility cavalry now, and Viper's forces are in minimal numbers when it comes to cavalry. Now, Viper could still have a window to hit those lumberjacks. As you see, there is a prayer tent coming up, which could be a sign that we're seeing Mista pick up relics. Viper adding TC number 2 as he's coming in for a raid on the wood line. That is going to yield 1 kill, potentially 2 kills. Great counterattack here by Viper. But on the right side, we do have the villagers found on the berries, and that could be a great way for Mista to hit his opponent over here. 2 town centers for Viper, so he's going to have superior villager count no matter what. The question is what Mista's going to do. He could start capping the sacred site, force Viper to make a move, and Viper has to delete that mill once again. The Khan has to shoot it. Now that the Khan has dealt 1 damage to that building with the arrow, that is marked for destruction. So if Viper deletes it, Mista still gets the bounty. Viper shouldn't delete that mill now. And indeed, he keeps it alive for the time being. It looks like Mista is not going to burn it down at all. Viper is just now forced to add farming eco, which is going to set him back a tiny bit. It's a big investment that he currently has to make, and you see, he's got 43 food per minute. Viper doesn't have a food economy, whereas if you look at Mista, he's got a very effective eco right now, despite the fact that he's behind by 14 villagers. Ovu also now in a big stone mine in the middle, and it's also at the front, which allows you to just drop the production buildings close to it and reinforce the battle a little easier. Viper at 700 stone, he's getting ready to drop a castle, but is he gonna have his window to do it? That's the big question right now. For now, he's trying to deal with these forces on the southern part of the map. But as things stand, there is going to be a raid coming in from the north as well. Some men-at-arms are increasing in numbers. And look at that tower overlooking the area for Mista. This is going to give him so much vision, so much insight to the game plan of Viper. And I think that if Mista starts capping that sacred site, Viper could be in trouble. Men-at-arms increasing in numbers for Mista for the time being. Viper is still pretty active with those knights, and there is Mista capping the sacred sites. Behind this one, he could use the prayer tent's mobility to pick up all the relics, and I do see 2 relics already garrisoned for Mista, so he's doing just that. He's actually picking up the relics and bringing them back with the monks, which is a little surprising. You can move your prayer tent close to the relics and just drop it off over there. Mangonel set up for Viper, that's going to be quite effective against the infantry, but it's also a very expensive siege unit, so you can't afford to lose it at this point. And look at that, 2-pronged attack once again coming in here from Mista. He's ready to jump on that Mangonel. Viper's got repair villagers nearby, and he is probably going to repair this as well. The Khan gets a hit directly in his face. Viper keeps repairing, but Viper is also losing villagers behind this one, and you see, there's the counterattack coming in from the other side. Viper is just getting surrounded from all directions here. 33 army versus 18. Viper will keep that Mangonel alive, but he's going to keep losing villagers that are repairing it, and now the men-at-arms just don't care. They just keep running into the eco of Viper, killing villagers left and right. Viper is still repairing that Mangonel. He knows his life might depend on that. Khan microing left and right over here, trying to juke those projectiles fired by the Mangonel. Behind this one, Viper is burning down the Ovu of his opponent. Mista was trying to burn down some houses, and Mista just sending out the melee units, the knights, the men-at-arms, to try and kill that Mangonel. The Mangonel is sandwiched in between the enemy forces and the forest. That is a dead Mangonel out there. Mista getting the surround over there. Viper committed so many villagers to repairing this, and this is not the starting TC, so only 10 villagers fit inside. The others will have to make a run for this one. Viper dropping in villager count. Despite the fact that he has 2 town centers with the French, he now has an even villager count with Mista, and his entire eco is getting rampaged by men-at-arms and the knights. Viper taps out, and with that, Mista takes game number 2 as well with the Mongols. Confident gameplay from both players, but in the end, Mista was able to leverage the power of the Mongols over here. Multiple directions, and once again, the ability to just raid from multiple directions, the ability to just use your mobility advantage, came in as a clutch move for Mista. He was able to stretch out the attention of Viper so much that in the end, he just overran him with units from multiple directions. Mista with Mongols on King of the Hill is one of the scariest opponents in the entire tournament. In fact, it might be the scariest opponent. I think this is the best combination of a player, a map, and the civilization. So Viper was in for a tough matchup over here, especially having the French, and now he has also lost one of his home maps, so it is match point for Mista. We have to keep something in mind, however, and this is extremely important. Viper is one of the most accomplished and experienced players in Age of Empires history. And he has come back from such deficits millions of times. He's not a player that's going to waver under pressure. He's not a player that's going to collapse when he falls behind 2-0. He's a player that will gather his thoughts and he's going to deliver his best game in game number 3, I think. This is the classic Viper that we're used to. Whenever he needs it the most, he's going to deliver his game, his best game. And I think that's going to be game number 3. So Mista is up 2-0, but this set might be far from done. If Mista wins this one, that's a gigantic win for him, and a huge loss for Viper, who, as I said, would move to an elimination position if he loses this set as well. He would be 0-2. He lost versus the Muslim yesterday, and now he's down 2 games versus Mista. So we will see what game number 3 brings. That's going to be on the other home map of Viper, which is going to be Mongolian Heights. As you see on the screen, we do have dozens of civilizations still remaining here. I wonder what Mista has on his mind for this one. Could be Rus. Knowing Mista, it could be something cheesy like HRE or Chinese even. I'm really curious to see what game number 3 brings us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Viper versus Mista. Match point in the hands of Mista, not something that I expected when the series started. I thought that this could go down the line to game number 5, which is still a possibility, but it's a little shocking that Mista right now is leading 2-0. We are going to have Viper spawning in the blue colors using the Holy Roman Empire on the left side, and on the right side we're going to have Mista playing as the Rus in red. So neither of the players popping out the civilization that's super conventional on this map, but definitely Rus is more common than HRE. I'm curious to see what Viper has on his mind with the Holy Roman Empire. As I said when I introduced this series, I do believe that Viper is also one of the players that has dozens of hidden and secret strategies out there, and this would be one of the times to pop one. Obviously, you're trying to save your strategies as long as possible because you're trying to save your hidden strats until the grand finals if possible. However, you have to consider something over here. It looks like our Spectator actually jumped into the game a little too late. I'm just now noticing that we're already at the 3-minute mark, so we have docks for both players. It's not my fault, by the way, so whenever you see me starting to cast, that's exactly when the live feed receives the gameplay as well. So, little shocking over here, because we have apparently passed the time frame at which Viper and Mista have both dropped their docks. So Viper is definitely one of the players that has a couple of secret and hidden strategies in his pocket, and this would be one of the times to pop out one. Because if you think about it, as I said, he loses this game, he's going to fall 0-2 in his series, which is something that he can still survive, but he's gonna have to win basically all 3 remaining sets that he's going to play in the upcoming days in order to have a semi-guaranteed spot at survival and getting into the quarterfinals. Looks like wars are coming up right now for both players. We have docks for both sides, but of course, Rus is a very dangerous opponent on waters because they can convert their Lloydia fishing ships into combat vessels. If we look at Viper for a brief moment, he's trying to stop that palisade wall. Of course, he himself wants to start adding galleys over here, and the end result is just going to be that both players will likely finish those walls. Viper is pulling the villager to try and kill the Vil of our red player Mista here, and it looks like he's gonna be able to do that. Looks like we have a bit of a desync between the player POVs and the cast, but here it is. Villager is being pulled, but it looks like there is a window to escape for Mista, so he's gonna be able to finish those walls over here. This basically means that both players will be happy fishing, and it looks like Viper's scout is freaking out a tiny bit. Mista is going to lose that villager, it's not even a question. But he was able to finish those walls, and that's what matters. And looking at the economies, it is going to be identical, 22 versus 22 as we speak. Neither of the players going up to feudal ages. Viper is super heavy on the gold department. We do have the Golden Gate already coming in here from Mista, and Viper is just now placing the Aachen Chapel. We haven't really seen the amount of bounty that was collected by Mista, but he probably took down the Huns on his side, and there are quite a lot of wolves on this map as well, so I would think we are looking at around 220 to 275 if I had to predict. But once our spectator switches to the POV of Mista, we'll have a clearer picture. Now, It looks like one of the hunts is actually not taken down, so I wonder how much Mista actually took down from the hunts. And the other one is taken down, so that's actually 70. And of course, he was probably prioritizing the wolves, and we are seeing a stable being dropped here by Mista. Rus have access, there is the bounty, 275. So that's a quite decent accomplishment for Mista, and if he took down the other patch of huntables, it would be beyond 300. So the Rus have access to early nights, a fact that's often forgotten because most people use it on water maps nowadays because of the Lodya attack ships. So this is an option here for Mista, and I wonder if Viper is expecting that, because nowadays you don't see the Rus being used as a night civilization very frequently. And as you could see, Viper was very heavy on the gold department. If he keeps that many villagers on gold, that could be wide open for raiding. The answer is that Viper is going to see that. He's going to scout his opponent's base, he sees the stable, he sees the range, so he knows that full feudal pressure is coming. And the appropriate response is the same thing that would be the response to a French Knights and Archer build, Horsemen and Spearmen. So I would expect Viper to start adding Horseman Spearman composition here. Looks like it's going to be double stables even for Mista, so it's going to be full feudal pressure. I understand the concept here, because in this map you oftentimes try to go for that semi-fast castle play, especially if you're not getting pushed on land and your fishing eco is walled. So I'm not surprised that he's trying to put up some feudal age pressure, because if he's expecting his opponent to fast castle, that could be devastating, especially with such a gold mine that is so exposed for Viper. Viper is dropping his stable right now, and he's dropping a defensive tower on that gold mine. The problem with the defensive tower is that it's not going to hold against 3-4 knights charging in and killing a villager every once in a while. For now, the first knight is crossing the river. This is something that is spotted by Viper, so he's fully aware of this one, and there's a second archer range coming in even for Mista, so this is a full-on feudal age pressure. Now, keep in mind that this could still be, to a certain extent, a decoy. If Viper sees 2 stables, 2 ranges, he should expect full feudal pressure. But knights are expensive, and Mista could stop producing them any moment, and because the Rus have a rather decent wood eco, they are not too worried about investing into 4 production buildings in Feudal Age, even if they're not being very heavily used. First knight now hits the tower over here. Looks like it's not going to charge on the villagers, so that knight is just going to absorb some arrow fire from the tower. Here's the deal, we have a galley on the right side, however, from Viper. I think he managed to sneak a dock up on the right. Indeed, he did. I was wondering if either of these players will try to do that, and part of the reason why Viper's fishing eco is a little safer is it's because it's in the corner. And because that fishing eco is in the corner, it's much more difficult to sneak a dock on it. And now, Mista is in trouble because his fishing eco is in jeopardy. He can start converting these fishing boats to combat ships, but the moment that fishing ship takes just a volley, he's going to be in trouble, because a damaged fishing ship will be converted into a damaged Lodya attack ship, and it looks like for Mista, he's just giving up on his fishing eco for the time being. This is not a move that he expected, and I said this before. I think, based on my experience with Viper in Age of Empires tournaments, I do believe that Viper is the player that delivers the best game when he needs the most. And that's exactly the case over here. So far, this is the cleanest play from Viper. He's in a good position. His base is well defended. He's able to push his opponent's fishing eco, and now he's got his own fish, whereas his opponent doesn't, giving him a nice 4 eco advantage, as you see at the top of the screen. Viper now has a barracks, but you're not seeing a tremendous amount of units popped out by him, so he's probably aware of the fact that at this point the towers are sufficient to defend. There's a small group of units moving rather fast to the north. I would expect them to be a horseman. It's right here on the minimap right now. That's exactly the 4 that we're looking at. Probably 2 horsemen probing the base of Mista here. There is a fishing ship popped out here for Mista to repair the combat vessels. He's probably going to sink one of the galleys, but Viper is building a fishing ship as well. I don't think that Mista is going to be able to sink it, actually, because Viper is pulling this away, and Mista doesn't really have the forces. There is the 2 horsemen I was referring to, and that is going to be 1 dead villager from Mista. Now Viper is just firing on all cylinders. You do have the horseman raiding Mista. Oh, look at that, the knights are actually firing away at that galley, but the galley does a ton of damage to land units, so the best thing here for Viper could potentially be to just try and kill some of those archers and then get that galley repaired. You still have to respect the fact that Mista's got a scary land army, and that is not to be underestimated. Viper is going to have to save that combat ship if he can. I don't think he can save that. He's going to repair the other galley, but this one is going to be taken down. There is no escape path on the north. And suddenly, Viper is going to lose a random villager. I think that was the dock villager from before on the right side. Now Viper adding his own archer, or excuse me, not archers, but spearmen and horsemen. That's going to be a composition that beats Mista's one. The question is numbers, because Viper doesn't have spectacular numbers right now. 5 villagers garrison into the tower, but it looks like Mista is ready to commit against this one. If he takes down this tower, Viper could be in serious trouble. And it looks like he's committing against that one. Archers will fire away at the spearmen, and those spears are being taken. I do think that those are not hardened spearmen right now, and that's a problem for Viper. And the knights survive a lot of arrow fire. They're much sturdier than the horsemen are, and suddenly Viper could be in the danger of losing that tower, but he says no. He pops emergency repairs. He waited patiently for that. I love that move from Viper. He waited patiently for the knights to drop it to like 60... drop it by 65-70% HP, so the overall HP is around 25 to 30%. And then he just pops emergency repairs and saves the tower. He also had arrow slits on, finished, so this is going to mean that that tower is going to be very difficult to push. Now Mista is going to have to change the angle of the attack. He's now moving towards those lumberjacks, but Viper's numbers are steadily increasing, and he's still harassing Mista here quite effectively. Another villager here could fall to those horsemen, and this is not the first time that Mista is losing villagers to those counterattacks. Viper now with a confident 8 villagers lead. Now Mista's force here is still rather scary, so you gotta be careful here. If you're Viper, you gotta respect the fact that that's a large group of archers and knights. Not a single villager falls from Viper, however, and that's the key thing here. As long as villagers are not falling, Viper is going to be perfectly fine. Look at that. Viper is even committing against those villagers underneath the town center, and Mista is completely underreacting this. He's probably too focused microing his ships and his army, and because of that he might not even notice all those horsemen harassing him. Ultimately the town center is going to clean it up, so not the end of the world for Mista. But he has lost some villagers over here to those horsemen, and that's definitely painful. We're looking at Viper's POV right now. He is still repairing those combat ships over here. As you see, he's using fishing ships to heal the galleys. This is something that Mista could utilize. He could snipe off the fishing ship from the back and then still focus down the galleys. That's exactly what he's doing. Viper will pull away the weak fishing ships over here. He still has 2 over there. Pulls all the way back, and it looks like the galley is also going to be saved. Viper is sending his horsemen to the north, garrisoning the tower. Mista will try to push that tower once again, but that's just going to be a distant dream. Emergency repairs will save that tower once again, and you also have arrow slits on it, so Mista won't be able to push that. Viper for now holding with some spearmen, also focusing more and more on adding the defensive emplacements on those towers. And meanwhile, he's launching counterattack with the horsemen. He's ahead by 9 eco. And Mista, he has his base lying wide open, and he didn't really react to those horsemen hitting his eco before. So this is a great opportunity for Viper to once again do damage. This passage, this entire loop around here for Viper, this one, is something that has been haunting Mista for such a long time. And those forces are coming through in the middle. It's just the fact that Mista doesn't have the time to look at those forces. He cannot see them, simply because he's too focused elsewhere. And once again, the horsemen will jump on the gold miners, and they will once again inflict 1 or 2 villager kills, plus a ton of idle time. And behind this one, Viper is going into Castle Age. We've talked about this before in previous sets. The Holy Roman Empire economy is no joke. And when you also have the fishing eco supporting it, it's even more powerful. Defensive towers are well positioned for Viper, protecting the wood line, protecting the gold mine. Now we're talking about Castle Age. Hawks could become a reality soon for Viper, as he's going towards those relics. Mista is in serious trouble here. He's nowhere close to Castle Age. He cannot push Viper's base. In fact, his own base is getting raided left and right by horsemen, and he's soon going to lose the entire water control, because Viper just needs 1 hawk to destroy those docks and those Logia attack ships with. This is extremely difficult for Mista, borderline impossible. He could soon encounter some men-at-arms as well, which with the mace's upgrade should be able to deal with both the archers and the knights as well. This is going to be extremely difficult for Mista. He needs to inflict a tremendous amount of damage here at Viper's eco to have any chance at this game. He's going to kill a couple of villagers on those wood lines. Viper's reaction was a little slow over here. Takes down 2. But of course, behind this one, Mista has been losing substantial numbers as well, and Viper is already picking up the relics. This is the first relic he's bringing back, and it looks like Viper is going to play with knights over here for the time being. Once again, Mista is sending out gold miners, and I still think that he didn't notice those horsemen killing his gold miners. Because you see, he's sending gold miners into those horsemen. Same thing, if you look at the minimap here, Mista is getting absolutely slaughtered over there, and he's going to tap out. This is the moment where he realized that, oh shoot, my gold mine has been raided left and right, and I just got no tools of defending it right now. Viper is in Castle Age, I'm not. What can I do? And that's exactly the way that Viper gets back into this series. As I said, Viper is one of those players that delivers their best gameplay when he needs it the most, and this was a now or never for Viper. He needed to salvage something out of this series. And that's exactly what he did. He stays alive. Now, the problem that Viper is going to face in the coming games is that he used up both of his home maps. He lost the neutral map, Arabia. He lost one of his home maps. So the only way that he's going to reverse sweep this set is if he's able to win on both home maps from Mista. And we have seen that Mista is extremely effective on his own home maps because having his own home maps plays to the biggest strength of Mista, and that is the somewhat unpredictable strategies. Viper has scouted Mista very thoroughly, so Viper is aware of the cheesy strategies that Mista can pop out, but obviously Mista probably has a lot of tricks, and Mista knows very well that he can't afford to let Viper crawl back into this one, because the coming game is going to be extremely important, given the fact that if Viper wins that, suddenly it's a 2-2 scoreline, and you're basically playing a best of one on the final map. The two home maps that are available for Mista are Lipany and Highview. Both of them are rather open maps. I'm curious to see what Mista has on his mind with those. We'll have to see in game number 4. Viper staying alive for the time being, and Mista still at match point. Ready to age up. But here's the interesting part, right? You will still need to make that House of Wisdom. And the reason why this is an interesting topic to talk about is because with the Abbasids, you have to sort of choose between a mill and the House of Wisdom at the beginning. Viper chose the mill, which means that he has to place a lumber camp to chop wood, and then drop the House of Wisdom. Whereas for Mista, he's opening up with the sheep and the gold, and this actually should, in theory, give him a slightly faster feudal age, or at least, speaking to pro players like Beastie, for example, I sort of heard that feedback that it's actually a little easier to squeeze out the good feudal age timing if you start with the sheep and only later transition to berries. We'll have to see if it's actually reality, but it indeed seems like Mista's gonna have a slightly faster feudal age. You see, he's at 300 food, he actually cancels some villagers 390 and 200, and Viper, little lower on the food and gold. Part of the reason why is because he has to commit villagers to chop wood. Mista doesn't have to commit any villagers to chopping wood because he is using the sheep and he's going for gold. He made a house, the House of Wisdom, and the mining camp. And of course, the lumber camp is now being made. The idea is that he doesn't have to make a mill, which means that he doesn't have to chop wood that early. Anyways, and now we're up to feudal age for both players. The discrepancy is very small, but these are the two differences, or well, this is basically the major difference that you can notice between the two build orders of the players. And this is something that is a quite significant deviation in many games. In this game, I would say it's minimal of an effect, but we'll see how that goes deeper into this game. This being said, Mista is very heavy on the lumberjacking department, but he hasn't started sending villagers towards stone. Now, if you look at the stone deposits for Mista, both of those are very exposed. So if he wants to go for a second town center, he needs to mine those stone very early. Now, the thing is that against Abbasids, you don't necessarily need to rush it that much because you're not expecting the Abbasids to hit you super early and cut you off from stone. Meanwhile, for Viper, that stone is much safer, so he doesn't need to rush mining that stone as much as Mista needs to. Obviously, assuming that both players want to go for 2 town centers. But you also have to consider something. The most obvious way to play an Abbasid mirror, or any kind of Abbasid matchup, is to play 2 town centers. So you gotta ask the question, do you want to do the same thing as your opponent? And it looks like Mista says no. Viper mining stone over here. This will probably be spotted by Mista. He's got his scout at the southern part of the map. He hasn't seen that stone mine yet, but he's looking for it. And it looks like Mista is starting to mine stone right now. It seems that both players will be playing with 2 town centers. And now you have to ask another question. Is either of these players going to play with 3? Because you're going to be doing some identical things here pretty much, so the question becomes, what are you going to do to gain an advantage over your opponent? Because there is no military on the battlefield. You will both be booming on 2 town centers, so how are you going to get an advantage? One way to do it would potentially be to add a 3rd town center and gain a villager advantage. The risk in doing that is that you're going to delay your castle age quite a bit. So as weird as it sounds like, I think it's safer to go 2 TCs and just assume or hope that your opponent is going for 3, because your opponent is also trying to build some sort of advantage against you. And if that's the case, you can just go for a faster castle age time and start leveraging the fact that you have knights while the opponent doesn't have it yet. So this could be an interesting mind game over here. For now, both players are getting ready for that 2nd town center to be dropped. Will be interesting to see the locations. Viper's gold mine is quite exposed, so it's possible it's going to be close to that. Although it's also possible it's going to be at the back, close to the wood line and the berries. So multiple spots available here for Viper. Looks like one sheep. What happened to that sheep? Was it hit by the villager? It seems to be so far away from that vill. I wasn't looking for a split second, so I'm not exactly sure what happened to that poor sheep. But now that's that sheep out there. Second TC on the way for Mista, right next to that stone mine and the forest. And for Viper, he's placing it close to the hunt, to the left side of his base. This is something that you commonly see with second town centers. You're trying to secure food, because ultimately what you need for consistent villager production will be food. So having a consistent supply of that is something that you really have to guarantee for yourself. It's also going to protect the berries from the left side. And if I see Viper's stone count, look at that. It's still 180 per minute, 190 per minute. Viper is the one going for the third town center. And as I said before, I think this is what you are building upon. Hoping that your opponent wants to get some sort of advantage over you, and hoping that he's going to play a third town center to try and do that. Whereas for Mista, it looks like he's actually going to play the fast castle approach. You see, he's now on the berries, he's sending a lot of villagers on gold, which is a sign that he's probably going to grab maybe a couple of economy upgrades, but more importantly, a castle age for himself. And you could see that Mista is so confident in Viper not pushing him that he's sending out more villagers to the berries. That's also a very clever thing to do. This is something very similar to what Viper did in the King of the Hill game. In that game, Viper was basically building his strategy on the fact that his opponent isn't really making army, so I can move out, take the hunt. In this case, Mista is going to do something very similar. Viper isn't making any army, so Mista is going to send out the villagers towards the berries. Now, Viper is going to react to this one. He sees the berries now, and he's gonna be like, oh shoot, I need to send something over there to kill villagers. Now, the smart thing for Viper to do would be to wait until he has 2 or 3 horsemen, because 1 horseman isn't going to do a ton of damage to those villagers. You probably kill 1 or 2, but keep in mind that Mista didn't have to invest into a stable and horsemen, so for Mista, losing 1 villager over there isn't very problematic. Viper, however, he's also moving out for berries. That's a nice reaction. He's realizing that he sort of needs to catch up to Mista, but guess what? Mista, only playing 2 town centers, he's already on food and already on gold, and he's ready to go up to Castle Age. The villager difference is minimal. In fact, Mista is leading compared to Viper, 32 to 31. But the most important thing here is that the moment Mista was done gathering the stone for a second TC, he immediately sent his villagers towards food and gold, whereas Viper kept the villagers on stone so he can afford the third town center. Here comes the first horseman pushing the villagers away. As expected, it's going to be at least 1 villager down, probably just 1 over here. As weird as it sounds, like, this is a perfectly acceptable loss for Mista, because he was on those berries for a long time and he didn't have to make a single army to protect them. Viper had to make a stable, Viper had to add a horseman here, and he's just now dropping TC number 3. And if you look at Mista, he's on the way to Castle Age with the Culture Wing. You can see that on the far right of the screen. This is one of the interesting elements of an Abbasid mirror, because in many ways, we are seeing that 2 town center faster Castle Age prevail over 3 town center plays. Now, of course, Mista is going to have to leverage that Castle Age with men-at-arms or knights, because if he doesn't, Viper is going to be able to capitalize on that third town center. For now, the villager count is dead even. It looks like Mista wants to play men-at-arms. I personally think that at least 1 stable would be reasonable to add, because the thing is that the men-at-arms take a lot of time to get to the opponent's base. Same thing with spearmen. Even though they can make siege weapons immediately, which could be intriguing for Mista here, they take a lot of time to get to Viper's base, which gives Viper a window to get to Castle Age. If you add Lancers, you have a high mobility unit that can just charge in, absorb some arrow fire, kill 1 or 2 villagers, and then disengage. So you could capitalize on your Castle Age advantage a lot faster by using at least 1 or 2 Lancers. Looks like Mista is not going to think about that, he's just going to play full barracks. And this is problematic, because if you do this, now Viper has a response to this. Viper is not far away from Castle Age himself. If you look at his resources, he's ready to go up to Castle. And what happens in these situations is that the Abbasid player going for a faster Castle Age will start pushing the opponent with men-at-arms, and the appropriate response here from Viper, in most cases, is going to be crossbows. Now, Viper is going to respond with his own men-at-arms, which could also work, because he's not going to be that much behind in terms of Castle Age timing. But if he really was afraid of this push, then crossbows would probably be a slightly better answer to the men-at-arms. If he feels like he's gonna get severely outnumbered, then probably crossbows is the way to go. For now, he's adding some barracks over here, and he has a stable, so he can actually play around with a couple of Lancers if he wants to. His first spearman arrives to the berries of Viper over here. Not really a major threat right now. You see the villagers are actually fighting back. Yep, there is a villager riot, and the spearman decides not to take the fight over here. He's thinking about bracing against those horsemen, actually gets one hit going. Viper is going to save that one horseman that's low HP. The other one will take down the spearman, and now we're seeing the first table being dropped by Mista. Viper is keeping track of those men-at-arms with the scout he has, whereas for Mista, he's got eyes on Viper's hunt. Speaking of which, Viper still has a lot of sheep underneath the town center. He's running out of his initial patch of berries, but he's got a second patch of berries that he's controlling. He's got relatively safe hunts as well, so for Mista, he can't really deny the food from Viper. So far, Viper really wasn't able to capitalize on that third town center. It's only a 4 villagers discrepancy, and that's a lot of villagers being pulled. They're just going for the berries. For a brief moment, I thought that they were going for a forward, but that's not the case. Currently, military advantage is on the side of Mista. Viper is still on the way towards Castle Age, and I see archer ranges. Are those ranges? Nope, those are houses. So for the time being, Viper is still in Feudal Age, and Mista is going to leverage that by sending out the men-at-arms and by sending the villagers towards that patch of berries. Horsemen will probably try to get some villager kills over there as the first men-at-arms get to the base of Viper. Viper is going to need some crossbows now because he's still far away from Castle and he just won't be able to match the numbers of the opponent. There are the archer ranges, 3 ranges to be precise. Men-at-arms already beating up some stone miners, however, so all the villager advantage that Viper had will probably disappear in a matter of seconds over here because Mista is coming in from all directions with the men-at-arms. And one thing that you have to be careful about is that while the men-at-arms can survive a lot of arrow fire, you don't want to just get them all killed by the town center fire because suddenly you will be left without an army. Viper villagers not reacting to those men-at-arms a little fast, and with that, another couple of villagers will be taken down over here. Viper has a lot of idols, that's the biggest concern he's having. You could see for a brief moment that his starting town center and even this second town center close to the gold is full of units. So right now, despite the fact that Viper isn't particularly losing a lot of villagers, it's all about the fact that so many villagers are idle. Viper is having trouble gathering resources. If we will look at his resource income per minute, that's going to start dropping quite dramatically. Only 200 food per minute for Viper, and it's getting worse. Look at Viper's food income. This is the number that you should look at. 173 versus 1,000. And this is the resource that you need to pop out men-at-arms, to pop out cavalry, to pop out crossbows even. Viper is able to get some crossbows on the battlefield, but his food eco is an absolute train wreck, and from this point on, Mista could feel the blood in the water. He could keep trickling in units, idling the villagers of Viper, which will make it very difficult for Viper to replenish his forces, and there's a chance for Mista to add some lancers himself now. He's got double stables to work with. And Viper's idle time here is going to start impacting his ability to field army, and you will see this number, the military count of Mista, starting to increase compared to this number, Viper's army count. Horseman also jumping on the opportunity to kill one of the crossbows over here. Men-at-arms Horseman is a great composition over here. Mista's got the tools to deal with those crossbows. And the reason why he's using Horseman over Lancers is because crossbows have bonus damage against Lancers, but not against Horsemen. For the time being, he's trying to play the food control game, also denying Viper from that hunt while trickling in some men-at-arms to the front. And behind this one, he's using those berries all across the map. That's a great way to use his map control. He's understanding that Viper has to defend, Viper is pinned inside his base, and Viper has to do something that he really doesn't want to, add farms. That's a terrible scenario for Abbotsford because, of course, it's a big investment for Viper right now. And the more important thing is that Mista is able to capitalize on that map control and just keep taking the berries. Viper's gonna have to invest a ton of wood into those farms. For now, he's back to 1,500 food per minute, but that's just because he's probably got like 50 villagers sent to sheep and the hunt. First mangonel now coming out, and now you're seeing some lancers hit the field. The moment you have mangonels going, those crossbows will have a tough time over here. Mista once again with the mobility advantage. We've had this in basically all games that we have had today. Mobility advantage for Mista, and Viper having trouble to keep track of all of those groups of units because his army has a much lower mobility. Crossbow Spearman will struggle catching up with all those horsemen and potentially lancers flanking and trying to get some damage done on those lumberjacks. Viper also moving out on the left side over here. There is a villager moving forward. It might actually be more villagers. He might be going towards that gold mine because his initial gold mine over here is getting harassed quite heavily. Looks like the crossbows will pop out of nowhere here. Mista is going to be surprised here. He's going to lose 2 villagers. But in exchange, his mangonels are now pursuing and the crossbows can't turn back to fight. If the crossbows turn back to fight, they will start getting massacred by those mangonels, and one thing that Viper did not know about was the mangonels. Those mangonels were hidden in the stealth forest, and now Viper is in a full retreat mode 29 army against 32. The problem is that Viper's forces are clearly inferior compared to the opponent's one, because Viper has no tools to respond to those mangonels. The men-at-arms and lancers will start committing against this one, because Mista is realizing that the crossbows can't stand that fight. The moment they stand and fight, you're going to see the mangonels leveling them to the ground, and while Viper is cleaning up some villagers over here on the left side, I do believe that the main action is going on right next to Viper's TC over here. On the right side is also a bit of a raid from Viper, but I'm curious at the battle in the middle, because Viper is pulling the villagers to try and burn down the mangonels. Mangonels would have an opportunity to set up over here, and the men-at-arms are slaughtering all the villagers here. So many villagers going down, and not a single mangonel was taken down. Mista lost quite a lot of villagers here to the raids on the left and the right. That was nice counterattacks from Viper. So Mista is down to 68 villagers. But Viper also lost some numbers. Now Viper is not done yet. He's sending in more units, and suddenly it's getting a little concerning for Mista, because protecting his own eco is also a significant priority that so far he has been neglecting. He can send back a couple of men-at-arms, and now he's shelling that town center. And it looks like Viper is focusing on those berries. Mista himself is struggling for food a tiny bit. He was forced away from the berries, so suddenly Mista is the one that's starting to run low on the food income. He still has the mangonels, however. Looks like another villager gets taken down here. Man-at-arms are now here to clean up the spearmen though, so Viper's forces will probably get wiped out over here. They might get 1 or 2 villager kills. But there is some horsemen coming in from the north that could do some damage on those stone miners, especially because Viper will probably be focused on trying to stop those mangonels. First Springbolt has been dropped over here by our blue player Viper, but the man-at-arms will just charge on them. They have to take down the Springbolts. There's actually more Springbolts than that, but that's a big traffic jam. The volley of the rocks coming in here from the mangonels, dealing a ton of damage on those crossbows. The mangonel still survives. Springbolts taking down 2 mangonels. The third one also gets executed here by the Springbolts. But the men-at-arms managed to take down most of the crossbows with the help of the mangonels. Looks like Mista is going to call it a day and retreat. But the key thing here was that Viper was able to get rid of 3 mangonels here. I feel like that last mangonel targeting the villagers was a significant problem for Mista, because he wasn't able to finish out all the crossbowmen. And Viper was given too much breathing room. Viper was given enough time to start adding Springolds, and suddenly his military is back on track. He's in a decent position now because he's got an army to contest the map with. 31 military population against 30. And guess what? Viper is getting quite a lot of Springolds going. That's going to take down all the mangonels. So suddenly, Mista has no direct answer to all those crossbows. Mista is trying to flank around with horsemen, which is great. But in this scenario, you could actually justify sending lancers instead, because the horsemen have a limited amount of damage output, so it's a little more difficult to inflict significant damage with them. Once again, Viper is sending out some flanking forces to raid Mista, and we have seen this before so many times. Viper feels like there is blood in the water. He's just now getting warmed up, and I get the feel that every moment I'm seeing this game, I'm seeing Viper with more and more confidence, whereas Mista seems to be a little stuck. He seems to have a bit of an issue here finishing off Viper, and that's something that could hurt so badly over here. Mangonel's trying to run for their lives over here. The tower actually spots them for Viper. Springolds will open up against them. Mangonels unleashing death and destruction on those crossbows. For now, Mista is going to be able to save all 3 of his mangonels, but his food eco is now in trouble. It's getting raided by men-at-arms at the bottom. You could see it on the minimap, and indeed, Mista is not even noticing this. Viper is combining the battle in the middle so effectively with these raids, and Mista is distracted. Mista cannot see this raid going on because he's focused in the battle in the middle, and Mista keeps losing villagers. He's stuck at around 70, whereas Viper is now up to 100. Suddenly, Viper's eco is stronger than ever. Mista behind this one, trying to cap some sacred sites, but I don't think those are going to be long-lived, so it's going to have a small impact on the game, but it's not going to be significant. Mista keeps losing villagers, however. He's down to 66. He's still trying to raid with his own horsemen, but he needs a little bit more damage output here. Just a couple of lancers mixed into that army would be so helpful, because they would do a so much better job killing all the villagers from Viper. Viper, as expected, he's sending a villager in there to that sacred site. He is going to stop Mista from capturing it, and on the face cams, you can see the disappointment in Mista's face. Viper is going to take game number 4 over here. Mista is realizing that his eco is so much behind in a mirror matchup like this one. And just look at the face of Viper. This is the Viper face that we have seen in years and years of Age of Empires. Not just Age of Empires 4, but Age of Empires 2 as well. Not a single bit of stress on that face. Not a single concern can be seen on his face. He knows his capabilities. And as I said, Viper plays his best when he needs it the most. And the last 2 games were a sign of that. It's almost becoming a trademark for Viper to reverse sweep opponents at this pace. Because Vista was up 2 games and Mista was dominating. But now Viper sees the blood in the water and suddenly he's got a window that's larger than ever. It's an even Steven scoreline. It is still going to be the home map of Mista, but it's going to be Highview. And Highview, in many ways, is similar to Lipany, especially because we got a very open Lipany generation in this previous game. So we're going to see something very similar when it comes to the not necessarily the outcome, but when in terms of playstyle, we might see something very similar, and that is something that could potentially swing the battle in the favor of Viper even. Viper takes the win here with the Abbasid Mirrors, and now we're talking about an even scoreline. It is going to come down to a decider game, a crucial decider game. Because as much as I said that if Viper loses this set, he would fall down to elimination position, this also is applicable to Mista. Mista loses this, he will get to an elimination position. He lost to Lenok yesterday, now he's 2-2 with Viper. He was up 2-0, and it's his home map coming up. He's got HRE, French, Chinese remaining. Viper's got Rus, English, Chinese. We'll see what game number 5 brings us. An extremely important game coming up for both of these players. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to game number 5. Decider game in between the Mista and the Viper. Mista was up 2-0 against Viper, but Viper made a comeback, and now it's an even scoreline. We do have Viper playing as the... Wait, what is the colors? Both players have blue in their POV, I believe, for themselves, and right now we're looking at Viper's POV. And whereas for Mista, as you see, Mista is also thinking that he's blue himself when he's playing. That's the standard way that things look like, it appears. So we'll have to get back to the caster POV in order to see which color is which. But indeed, as you see, whoops, wrong scene. And now we're seeing this. Mista is going to be the player in red, playing as the French. And on the left side, you're going to have Viper playing as the Rus over here. Rus on Highview, this is a civilization that we have seen a lot at the beginning of Age of Empires 4 competitive scene, especially when the fast castle build was so powerful. It's all about grabbing that hunt for yourself, and you see Viper so far having a bit of a trouble over here because Mista's got 2 scouts, and 2 scouts means that he can one-shot a deer, and Viper cannot do anything about it. Viper actually yoing that last deer over here for himself. We'll have to see how Viper is doing with the bounty, and the deer is not the key factor when it comes to collecting bounty over here. It is going to be the wolves. On Highview, you have so many wolves, so all you're focusing on is aggroing those wolves, bringing back as many of them as you can to your town center, because ultimately that's going to be your primary source of gold in Dark Age for the Rus. Now, the French is a civilization that we've seen used very frequently with the archers and knights composition. And I said this at game number 3, when Viper was down 2 games, that Viper will need to pop something potentially surprising. Wasn't really something that happened. He played standard and he played well, but now I think it is Mista's time to pop something surprising. If he has a hidden and secret strategy, this will be the time to pop it. Because I get the feel that if he just plays standard, Viper has so much confidence right now that it would be very difficult for Mista to beat him in a rather meta-focused or just standard game out here. Mista will be successful aggroing all 3 wolves over here. That's going to be a big win for him. That is 75 bounty that he can deny from the Viper over here. Looks like he's just now sending villagers to wood and he's dropping that school of cavalry as we speak. Whereas on the other side, for Viper, it looks like he is not aging up just yet. Am I right? Yeah, there is no age up building from Viper. I'm actually curious. Viper's at 70 gold. Hold on. Okay, he's just dropping the landmark. Looks like our overlay is lagging behind a tiny bit, I assume. For a moment, I thought that Viper won't have gold for Feudal Age, which would have been an absolute disaster, but there's no way that he's going to have insufficient amount of gold, especially on Highview. Mista was very successful denying the bounty from Viper, you see. So many wolves were aggroed by Mista. That's 100 gold that was just denied by taking those wolves, and of course some was also denied taking on the hunt. Mista opened with 2 scouts. This is one of the scouts coming out from the town center. This is something that you have to do when you're playing against the Rus, because you simply need something that aggroes the wolves, also kills the deer as fast as possible. So against the Rus, you're almost guaranteed to start with 2 scouts, simply because you need to. Otherwise, your opponent will get so much bounty. Mista needs to keep aggroing all of those wolves out there, and I think he lost track of one of those. Or is there free following? It's a little difficult to tell. The resolution isn't necessarily great. It's a little blurry. So I'm struggling to tell if there is 2 or 3 wolves following him. I think it's only 2, however. So he might have actually lost track of one of those. Indeed, it seems to be 2 wolves trailing him. Town Center is going to finish those off, and it looks like Mista is going for stone. Interesting. This is very interesting. Viper is going to have a defensive tower to the southern part of his base. Like the positioning, because this will give him some vision to the south. So it is going to help him diagnose if Mista is coming in with aggression from the south. So by having a tower at the bottom of that wood line, he's going to be able to see if Mista is coming in with knights from this direction, while also boosting his lumberjacking. Because of course, this tower is going to boost the amount of wood dropped off at that lumber camp. And of course, from the right side, you have vision provided by the town center. So this outpost is spectacular for Viper. It's going to provide a lot of vision, while also boosting his lumberjacking tremendously. Despite Viper missing out on a lot of wolves, he's still at 345 bounty, which is insane. Absolutely ludicrous, in fact. And there is going to be the first horseman coming out for Mista. I've seen Mista try this once. I think it was one of the qualifiers, playing with the French horseman, and it didn't really work out well, so I'm not exactly sure what he's thinking about. But what actually crossed my mind is that because the Rus are also sort of a knights, archers nation, at least in feudal age, you could technically gamble on spearmen, horsemen here. This is applicable to both civilizations, to be honest, because we've talked about the French being the knights and archers civilization before. So both of these civilizations could think about spearmen, horsemen to try and counter such a strategy. For the time being, we are seeing minimal combat happening all across the map. Viper's resources aren't looking spectacular, so he's not going to have a super fast castle age over here, and Viper is moving in for the boar. We have seen this a couple of times. I think it was 3DB that actually did this, and he's going to aggro the boar with the scout. Viper will aggro the boar with the scout, which means that he's absorbing the damage with the scout, which can heal itself back up, so he's not losing HP on the villagers. And the reason why this is such a good strategy on this map is because it's difficult to spot that hunting cabin. Oh, that was a mistake. That was a mistake from Viper. By finishing the hunting cabin, he's going to have the villagers automatically target the boar, and it was the villagers that actually aggroed the boar, so some of the villagers took some damage. Not a disaster for Viper, because as you see, all of the villagers are alive, but it could have been a little different. He actually didn't finish the hunting cabin, so it might have been just accidentally clicking the board then. Anyways, he's gonna have to finish that hunting cabin, otherwise it's going to be a long way home, whereas for Mista is going for a second town center. This will be spotted by Viper right now. A little bit of a greedy play here by Mista, but I'm not necessarily against it, because here's the deal. Let's say that the Rus go for a fast castle. What can they do here? If they go horse archers, those don't do that much against 2 town centers. Now, of course, the Rus could play men-at-arms, but they can't make mangonels or anything like that, like siege on the battlefield. And by the time the men-at-arms arrive, the French player could also be in castle age, and you could see some arbaletier pumping out to respond to that. So I think that this 2 town center build is actually very nice, but Viper's reaction to it is even better. Having that board taken is an insane amount of food income. 2,000 food we are talking about, gathered at a very fast rate. And do I see professional scouts? Yes, I see professional scouts for Mista. He's carrying in the carcasses. This is so much better for Viper. Viper jumps into the tower. He takes down the scout over here. Absolute disaster for Mista. Every single moment, Viper is showing more and more confidence. And now Mista could be in trouble simply because Viper is playing with such a level of confidence that we haven't even seen in this entire tournament, I believe. Second stable will be added by Mista, adding an archer range, so he wants to be aggressive. Probably Horseman Archers is going to be the name of the game. And look at Viper's build here. Wheelbarrow, lumberjacking upgrade, and he's going into castle age much faster than his opponent. This build is brutal. Viper is popping out his best build for the last game, coming in with the Abbey of the Trinity, and he's going to have no trouble picking up those relics, I would say. As you see, now we got the heart rate tracker, but I assume that those are heart rate trackers, but if that's the case... Okay, do we have some doctors watching these videos? I'm not a medical expert, but 51 heart rate feels a little low to me. 49 now. Either that or Mista is one of the most cold-blooded players ever. Like, you see, Viper's got 95, I can believe that. There is some pressure here in the decider game, but holy smokes, if that 49 is real for Mista, that's unbelievable. That would be unbelievable in a decider game in a very important set. So I'm curious to see if that's actually right. It's actually dropping. I hope Mista's heart isn't going to stop here in this battle, because at the pace it's dropping, I'm a little concerned for that. For now, Viper is up to Castle Age, and I love the proxy barracks. This is such a great move from Viper once again. I said that the biggest problem with the men-at-arms is that they take a lot of time to get to the opponent's base, and one way to battle that would be to build them on the front. This is such a great preparation from Viper. He's really showing off how effective his build is, and I think this is also, to a certain extent, coming from the scouting that he did on Mista. I think he was expecting something like this from Mista. He was probably expecting a 2TC build. He might have even scouted the stone mining so that he could confirm it. And the moment he saw the 2 town center build, he moves out for the boar. This is a strategy that B used, I think, against Mista, actually. Was it against Mista? I don't remember. But it could have been B versus Mista, actually, where we have seen 3DB moving out for the boar. And the idea here is that if your opponent is making basically no army, you can move out towards that boar and take it without problems. The other advantage that you're getting with the Rus is that your fortified tower can be... can field 8 villagers inside. So you can garrison more villagers in there. Now here comes the push here from Mista. He's still Feudal Age against Castle Age, but he has to take this tower down. He's ready to push this one. If there is any saving grace for Mista, that has to be this fight. If he takes down the tower and takes down the barracks in time, he's gonna have a potential window to destroy the opponent's production. The problem is that he doesn't have a great response to the man-at-arms. The Feudal Age Knights will actually work quite decently, but it's just a temporary solution, and Mista's gonna have to invest a ton of resources into those Knights. I'm not really confident in Mista's position right now, but if there's ever a chance, it might be this. Remember that Viper's food eco was very heavily focused around that boar. Now he's moving towards the berries, so he's going to be fine for the time being. As it looks like Knights will try to burn down the tower. Another advantage of that fortified tower is that it just takes so much punishment to go down. And of course you can fit 8 villagers inside, which means that it's very difficult to take down, and you can have 8 villagers garrisoned. If you can take that tower down, however, Viper would lose 8 villagers, and he would potentially lose his forward base over here, including all those production buildings. And the archers are still alive, picking off the spearmen. Mista is committed to this one, and Mista might be doing the right thing over here. It's a little risky, I would say, but I don't think that Mista has a choice. Mista has to take this tower down, set it on fire. Viper will probably jump out to the villagers, try to get some repairs, keep it alive as long as possible, and Viper is getting his Castle Age Knights going. He's realizing that, okay, you're going for Knights, I'm going for Knights as well, but I'm going to have better Knights over here because those are Castle Age units. Now here comes the problem for Viper, because that's gonna be 7-8 villagers getting killed over here. Mista needs to get every single one of those killed, because if those get away, Viper is going to consider it a victory. Viper knew fully well that this tower isn't going to hold if he isn't reinforcing it, so Viper needs to get away with as many villagers as he can, and it looks like he's not going to be able to get any of those out there. And now Viper's got a problem. Viper is down to 6 food. He's got some food eco, but he needs a ton of food to be able to produce Knights, and how many Knights do you see on the battlefield? Nothing. Mista needs to push right now. If he pushes those berry villagers, Viper is gonna have no access to food, and he's going to struggle mightily when it comes to reinforcing those Knight numbers. Viper is down to 31 villagers. Viper's got the relics going, so going for the gold mine doesn't make a ton of sense at this point, because Viper will have the gold income anyways. But if you can deny those berries, you could cut Viper off from the access to Knights. And you could also think about adding Spearmen now. You are seeing that Viper is switching into Knights over here. Your response should be Spears. Behind this one, Mista's got 58 villagers over 33. If Mista finds a way to Castle Age, this could be a disaster for Viper, and now Viper's eco is getting raided left and right. His food eco has collapsed by losing that boar and losing access to the berries. Viper still has the relics, but look at Mista. 1100 food per minute, 500 gold per minute. This might be it, and I'm seeing a trade card from Viper. This is how desperate his situation could be. He's realizing that his eco is so much behind compared to Mista's one, and Mista, I think, is ready to go into Castle Age. He's probably going to rush up to Castle Age with like 20 villagers, and I wouldn't even be surprised to see the Royal Institute. He's got the eco advantage. So what can he do? Go for the Royal Institute. He looks like he's going for the Guild Hall, which is going to give him an even bigger long-term advantage, but in this scenario, you could have justified going for the Royal Institute instead, trying to boost your cavalry as much as possible. Knights are now pushing those archers back, but if Mista gets to castle, he's gonna have access to the Arbaletry, and he's gonna be able to deal with this one. I think if it's even technology, Mista is in a commanding position, because Viper's eco is looking like a train wreck right now. He did lose a couple of villagers, and of course, he was up against 2 town centers the whole time. Knights of Mista will discourage Viper from charging in ever again. And there is another stable being dropped by Mista. He's gonna have a heavy focus on the knights, and Viper did not notice those gold miners getting slain. They're having trouble finding their way into the tower because the knights are blocking them. 3 more gold miners go down from Viper. Now it's almost double the villager count in the favor of Mista. Viper tries a Vololo, but that's not going to yield any result here. And Mista's knights are forcing Viper back into the town center once again. Viper forced to add farms over here. He's dropping a monastery because he needs the relics. The problem is that he's got no army now, and Mista is up to Castle Age. Mista's gonna have veteran knights very soon. He has double the villagers compared to Viper. Mista was up 2 games. Viper took 2 in a row, evened out the series. Mista is 1 step away from victory, however. All he needs to do is just do what French do best. Keep running around with Knight, keep decimating the eco of the opponent. Now, Viper is coming in to retaliate with a couple of Knights over here, and this could be dangerous for Mista. Viper's got some good scouting across the base of the opponent thanks to those scouts being there. So he sees where to strike. Knights will take the fight against the Spearmen here, actually. They know very well that those 2 spears won't stop 4 Castle Age Knights. And now Viper has to scramble once again, run back into the town center. The name of the game is Idle Time, and because Viper is forced to defend, Mista can afford to send out villagers towards those berries. Mista, once again, with a commanding position in this game, especially that food eco is spectacular. If you look at Mista's food eco, it's consistent 700-800, whereas on the other side, Viper is struggling mightily with food. It's still just 180 per minute because he doesn't have access to those berries, and the Knights of Viper have so little line of sight. They can't spot those villagers on the berries. Viper could technically raid them, but he doesn't know they are there. Viper has no idea about it. He could still send 1 knight to just try and probe that position, but he's too busy not dying to the knights of the French player. And as I said, whoever loses this set will become, or will be in a very difficult situation, because it's gonna be very difficult to come back from 0-2 when it comes to the overall sets in this tournament. And look at the heart rates. If that heart rate monitor is still going on and it's showing the correct value for Mista, 61 still in this position, unbelievable. If that's the actual heart rate of Mista, you can see why he's such a good player. Never wavering, super calm. And now he's at 78 villagers over 31. He's slowly cleaning up those barracks, but now it's all about those raids. And I think Mista wants to push that dagger as deep as possible. He's mining stone like a madman. I would be very surprised if that wasn't for a forward castle. He probably wants to drop a castle in between these 2 forests over here. Dropping a castle here would make it very difficult for Viper to get out of his base, and then you could just use the knights to raid from 2 directions. That's probably your best bet over here for Mista, and I'm fairly certain that he could complete a castle in that central area. Mista once again looping around with a couple of knights over here. Viper obviously isn't quitting this one because he knows very well that this is an extremely important game over here. He really felt like he could actually make a comeback and it looked so good. But after that, Mista just commits against that tower. Viper loses so many villagers and Viper wasn't able to capitalize on that Castle Age advantage. Mista gets to castle and suddenly Mista is in the driver's seat. Mista is looking for the berries, you see, he's probing those resources every once in a while. The same thing that Viper is doing, but Mista was prepared. Mista knows very well that Viper is going to probe those berries, so he was hiding a couple of knights over there to try and fight Viper's forces. Viper will try to escape now, try to use the hidden stealth forest for concealment, and there is the castle I was referring to, a Volo attempt in the middle. Knights might actually get converted. That's a little bit sloppy potentially from Mista. Indeed, the warrior monk goes down, but the 2 knights get converted. A little bit over-ambitious here from Mista. Not really going to be a disaster for him, though, because it's only 2 knights that he has lost, and he's not messing around. That's at least 20 villagers being pulled to drop that castle. You could see for a brief moment that Mista is pulling away the converted knights to the south, so that Viper cannot spot the villagers. He intentionally tried to distract them, running south, just so that Mista can't make that castle. One thing that Mista does not know, however, is that there is knights coming in here to try and stop that castle. Viper knows that this is a now or never. He has to stop this one, but there are so many villagers here, and if he's killing the villagers, he won't be killing the knights. Reinforcements are coming in here from Viper. That's a 50% completion, 60% completion. That's a lot of villagers that could be lost over here for Mista. The only way Viper could win this game is if he stops this castle. The castle goes up. Mista did lose about 15 villagers here, but it doesn't matter because he still has double the villager count, and now Viper is running for his life. His army still intact, but his eco is an absolute train wreck. Villagers getting slaughtered by the tower fire or the castle fire. Knights are rampaging his eco. Viper has basically no functional economy right now. He's going to launch a counterattack here. As you see, Mista's mining stone again. He wants a second castle in here. Viper is probably coming in for a last-ditch raid effort here. He's detaching a couple of knights to send to the south, and this could be a great spot to hit Mista, actually. That's a lot of villagers that could be exposed over there. Mista is ready to strike at Viper's eco as well. Of course, Mista has an easier time replenishing those villagers because he's got 2 town centers. Viper is down to 27. Unless he's able to do a tremendous amount of damage at Mista, this could be game over. And Mista just moved away to the left side. I think that was just a coincidence. If this is a coincidence because he's moving towards that gold mine, it's actually a very lucky coincidence for Mista, because this way the knights weren't able to find those berry villagers, and you see they are swinging to the base of Mista. This group of units did not find this position over here. And because of that, Viper wasn't able to accomplish anything with those raids. Mista is still standing at 74 villagers, Viper is at 25, Viper taps out, and with that, Mista wins a huge game. Look at that face, look at that happiness for Mista. He knows how important this game is, he knows how important it is. And as I said, Viper plays his best game when he needs it the most, but boy oh boy did Mista do this exact same thing. The best game that Mista has played probably came in the time he needed it the most. Absolutely stunning set over here, which started out as a stomp. Mista took down Viper in 2 of the first 2 games. That's actually all of them. And then Viper comes back with 2, and I feel like, you know, when Mista went into this game number 5, you get the feel that, oh boy, I don't want to be reverse swept. Because the moral advantage is on the side of Viper going into game number 5 when he just won 2 in a row. Viper was in a position to say, okay, I was down 2, but now I have momentum. I just won 2, and I'm going into this game with confidence. But Mista, come on, that was a beautiful, beautiful game from him. Viper wasn't really able to punish him for being so late to Castle Age, and ultimately, Mista was able to leverage that extra villager count that he has had. The timing of that pushing the central area to burn down that tower was key, because that was the entire thing that started the snowball. Viper was focusing so much of his food economy on that single boar, and that was the right decision at that time. Mista wasn't contesting the map, so Viper goes for the boar. The problem for Viper is that he didn't really have a fallback option. So the moment he lost the boar, he had to adjust to the berries, but those weren't really well defended, and while Viper got up to Castle Age, he didn't have food to make knights. So Mista started overrunning his eco, and now Mista was like, oh shoot, Viper is in Castle Age, I need to get to Castle myself. And that he did, and the moment he got to Castle Age himself, it was an even technology scenario, with one player having twice the villagers as the opponent, and with that, Mista takes the 5th game, and with that the set, Mista moves on to 1-1 in his standing in the Swiss bracket, whereas Viper falls down 0-0, or 0-2, excuse me. And with that, he's in an elimination position. Of course, there is 3 more rounds in the Swiss bracket, but out of the 8 players in the main event, only 6 will advance to the playoffs, 2 will be eliminated, and currently Viper is sitting on one of those spots. There is still some redemption to be found, because as we discussed in the first days of action, the lower you fall in the bracket, the weaker opponents you're going to get, because you're always getting matched against players at the similar part of the bracket. So Viper is likely going to get matched up, I believe, against the last player in the bracket. So that's going to be a winnable matchup for Viper, especially because he put up a great fight against Mista. But Mista showing strength over here, and an extremely important win for himself, because he himself avoids getting pushed down to that elimination spot. Might have been the most important game victory for Mista in the entire tournament.